You won't believe this. I sandwiched this quilt with stick glue. Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. Welcome back and Happy New Year. In today's video, I'm going to do what I do and take you from start to absolute finish with this quilt. We're making a car quilt today with some low volume fabric and 1-inch strips. No worries, I will give you all of the dimensions of the blocks and the cuts and all of that as we go along, so you can make it too. So many tips in today's video, and I try something new. Did it work? You'll have to wait and see. Enough talking already. Let's get busy making this car quilt out of some scraps and a panel. It's Tracy from the future. I wanted to remind you to stay tuned until the end so you can learn how you can win one of these. Oh yeah, platinum. All of my low volume fabrics are going to be 15 inches square to begin with. Now you can utilize a fat quarter for this, and that'll make things probably a lot easier for you. Or you can just do what I did and go through your stash and where you have a bunch of yardage, you can cut out the 15-inch squares. Now for my quilt, I wanted them all to be different because yours truly is different herself. We all want to be different, right? We don't want cookie cutter quilts. We want them to look personalized to who we are or to the person that we're making it for. So the tip I can give you here is, since I don't have a 15-inch square ruler, I went and took some, it's like wax paper or butcher paper, and I know it's not going to stretch or warp, and I cut out a 15-inch square. So this is going to help me keep things straight so that I don't make any miscuts, because I'm notorious for making miscuts when I don't have the proper ruler. To demonstrate this, I have 4 pieces of low volume fabric here. And I'm going to just set these like this. This one was a fat quarter and this one was a fat quarter. So I am utilizing up some fat quarters that were in my stash. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I go to a store or see some type of sale, even online, I will grab up as many low volume prints as I can, because I love to quilt with low volume fabrics. I just find the contrast, I don't know, delightful. I don't know what other word to use there, but it's just really delightful to see the low volume against a dark contrast, something with lots of saturation in it for what we're doing today. And I lined them all up, you know, to the corner here so that I make sure that I catch all of those edges in. I'm going to take my butcher paper and lay it down, make sure that, you know, it's covering. And I really need to invest in a 15-inch or bigger ruler. I really do. It's, you know, time. In due time. I'm going to QuiltCon here coming up next month. I wonder if they might have some 15-inch rulers there that I might grab. Those, you know, my suitcase is going to be big enough so I can, you know, pop that in, no problem, right? So here I'm just going to line up right along here where that butcher paper is. I'm going to put my weight there because I don't want it to slip. Oh my, this is a new blade. What the heck? Okay. And then I'm just going to shift this ruler over here, line it up along that parchment paper, or not parchment paper, butcher paper, I mean. Make sure that you're lined up here too, because you want to get this as square as possible. I am going to turn this like so. Make sure everything is lined up, squared up, I should say. And you're going to come in with your ruler over here. I dislike these right here because they don't ever stay, ever, these handle things. I don't know. They're not very suction-y. Sometimes, you know, I'll have to re-wet it and it'll stay for a little bit, but it doesn't last too long. I got to get out my what you call it, stickies, the command hooks, and put it on this one. But I had this one, I got it from like a grab bag or something, so I just threw it on there, and look, it's already come up. Do not like. Ah. Make sure that's squared up. Once you have that squared up, go ahead and slice it. Okay. So you can set that aside now. I think this pattern calls for 16 of these. So yeah. So I would cut them probably no more than 4 in a stack too, because you don't want to get too thick because then it might skew things up. So once you've cut this into a 15-inch square, you're then going to take your long ruler and you're going to line it up from corner to corner. And make sure that it doesn't slip. So from corner to corner, from point to point, and then you're just going to slice up the center. And then you should end up with that. Now the next thing you're going to do, that stupid ruler. I'm going to grab a different one. Let me see, I'll grab this one. So from this edge right here, your cut edge that you went corner to corner, right from the center, you're going to measure from that cut over 5 1/4 inches. That should be the halfway mark between this point and this edge. So I'm going to go 5 1/4, lining it up here on my ruler, 5 1/4. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to slice this off. Just like that. Now, if I were to look, that should be from the point over 5 1/4. Yeah, so I did pretty good, pretty good. This one I'm going to flip like that and come from this line over 5 1/4. And once you have it, slice it. So now you should end up with 4 corners here and 4 corners here, and these are identical. And the same with the insides. These 4 are identical to these. Once you have all 16 of your 15-inch squares all cut up, just like I showed you, you're then going to mix and match. So you're going to take 2 of these that are different. Make sure they're different. The only thing I was really mindful about in this part was making sure that I didn't have, say, 2 that looked a lot alike next to each other. Like these 2 had, you know, they were both whitish with the darker backgrounds, but it doesn't really matter because it's all going to get mix matched anyways. So yeah, just do your best and just make sure that there are no 2 that are alike. You know, you don't want to put this one back onto that one because you just cut that off, right? And you don't want it on this opposite side because it's already that one. So you're going to want to put it, like, say, over here with that one. And let's say this one here. And this one here. I mean, you would have a lot more variety once you cut up all 16, but yeah. And then that right there. You just don't want any of the 4 within the block to be the same pattern print fabric. Once you have all of your blocks figured out and you have 4 different patterns within each, you're then going to just stack them in a nice little pile, and you're going to set them aside for now. We're going to work on our 1-inch strips. So for this, when I stack them too, I'll stack them opposite each other like that. So it's kind of like in a plus shape. You know, it just kind of helps keep them separate. Check out these vibrant jewel tones in this panel that I just happen to have on hand, which is amazing, really. I don't know, I got it in some kind of subscription box like a couple years ago, and I had totally forgot about it. But I knew that this was going to work perfectly after I saw it in my stash. I knew that I wanted the contrast to be really saturated, and this totally fit the bill. And what was I going to use this for anyways, ever, right? So I believe they were 2.5-inch colored strips on there, or maybe less, I can't remember. But I went ahead and only cut 1-inch strips out of those, and I'll show you how I did that here in a sec. And I will link that Bohemian Rhapsody down below if I can still find it. So anyways, I cut the 1-inch strips. Now you might be wondering, why in the world are you cutting 1-inch strips? Why didn't you make them thicker? Well, you see, the logic behind it, because you know I always have some kind of logical reason why I do the things I do, right? So because of the 1-inch strip, if I cut 1 inch, I can still keep the block at 15 inches square when I go to cut it. If I make it any larger than that, any wider on any of the strip sets, then it's going to change the size of my block. It's going to either make it more rectangular on one edge and not square. So unless I did it all the same, I guess, but then it would still be difficult to make it square. So anyways, if I keep it at 1 inch, then I know that I can still maintain that 15-inch square. No matter which type of block that you end up doing, as long as you keep it at 1 inch in width, that strip, you're going to be totally fine in keeping your squared block the same exact size as when you started. So I hope that helps and makes sense. So anyways, here I'm just cutting half of the strip kind of straightish. Well, no, I am cutting it straight, but I'm cutting it on a non-straight line because these panels never come straight, in my opinion, ever. Any panel that I've ever bought, the lines are just not straight. So I had to give and take and wiggle a little bit in order to get a full 1 inch width of the color that I wanted. And I'll show you here at the end of this one strip here that, you know, where it curves up a little bit, because for whatever reason when they make these panels, the lines towards the ends, mainly where the salvages are not the straight parts. And you can see there on that one, it's not straight. And here I'm going to show you, yeah. See that, how the color's left there? And it's because panels just aren't straight. So you'll end up with 3 strips for every 15-inch block. So of course, you know, the long strip goes in the center. So you're going to take the 2 that you chose and then line that up in the center. And you don't have to use the Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, you probably have enough in your stash right now to make vibrant strips, right? Let me know in the comments. I'm sure you do. I'm almost positive. If you're anything like me anyways. I mean, I could have really dug in my scraps to get it, but it just so happened I had that panel, which really worked out. And the funny thing is, when I was thinking about this quilt, I thought, you know what, jewel tones. I want jewel tones. But of course I don't like flat jewel tones like the solids. I like the movement. So I like this one because it has these, you know, little prints within it. It's just very, very cute. I like it. So what you're going to do is just line up right sides together on the long side of the big piece. And you're just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. For this particular block, I'm going to press my seams outward toward the lighter side. I know it doesn't make sense to a lot of you, but that's just the way I did this one. I wanted the seams outward. It just made more sense. And you really can't see it once you get everything together, right? So I give that like a little press that way so things go nice. Okay, come on, you work with me. Once you get this one pressed outward, then you're going to take it and fold it in half to find the center. And how I do that is I just line up those little dog ears toward the end, and I make sure that they are really even. And I put those together, I make those kiss. And then I hold that, and then I fold it this way. And I make sure that this bottom angle here is together and that this is together. If they're not lining up, then I will shimmy them to meet in the middle somewhere, you know, but pretty much if you did everything right, you should be dead center. But, you know, it doesn't always come out that way because this is quilting, right? And so then I just pressed a memory crease right there in the center of that. So now I have this line right there that shows me where the center of this is. So then I'm going to take this one, the other big piece, and I'm going to fold that in half. I haven't sewn anything on it yet. Folding it in half, and I'm creating a memory crease there on this one. Put a little press there. Then I'm going to open this up, and I can see the line right there. And then I'm going to take this piece, the long side here to this long side, and I'm going to put right sides together, and I'm going to line up that memory crease right there in the center to the memory crease right here that I made a second ago. And once I have matched those up, I'm then going to pin it. This just assures us that we're going to definitely, you know, have a good match here at the end, because these blocks can sometimes be skewed off center very easily unless you follow, you know, the chain of command, so to speak. Because if you don't, you're not gonna match up. You're just not. And then I'm going to bring it over here, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. Then you're going to open this up, and you're going to press that seam outward. Usually I press them in, but for whatever reason, for this particular block, it just ended up that pressing outward it felt more right than the other way. You know what I mean, right? It's like the quilty feeling that you get where you should do one thing rather than the other. So that's kind of what I did here. Next, what you're going to do is find the center of this after they've been put together. Now, it should be still those marks right here. I can still see them kind of, but just to make sure that we are dead on, because I'm a double checker because I've messed up a lot of times with quilting. So I tend to double check. I'm going to fold this just so my dog ears meet up on both sides. Hopefully you can see that and understand what I mean. And make sure that these are all center. Like this one needs to come down a bit. I can tell already. But this side needs to come up. See, I'm not really dead on this one, but that's okay because I'm going to meet somewhere in the middle. Now once I feel like I'm dead center, I'm going to put a memory crease right there. I'm going to make a stronger one this time just to take over those other ones that might still be there. There we go, and then we're going to set that aside. Next, we're going to take these two pieces and we're going to add one of our colored strips. Go ahead and pop a couple pins in just to keep you straight. You know, I don't always, when I'm in a hurry, I don't, but let's take your time on this one. It'll be fine. And while I'm at it, let me just go ahead and pin this one on too. And then bring it over and do a 1/4 inch seam. Grab your other one. And you can do this all in stacks too. You don't have to do them separately like I'm showing you here. Just do them, set a bunch of stacks and just do them up. You're going to do the same thing here. You're going to press that seam outward. Give it a finger press first just so it can, you know, go in the right direction. And this one I actually sewed on backwards, but while I'm here and I made this mistake, let me just share this tip with you. Sometimes when you're dealing with fabric, people aren't going to notice if you're doing, especially the low volume ones, and you turn it the opposite way doing the back. So that is the back of this one, and there's the front of it, and you really can't tell too much of a difference. It might be muted just a little bit, but you know, it is what it is. I'm not going to redo that. So while that's pressing out, and then you're going to fold this one in half, and you're going to find the center. Hopefully you can see that. I'm lining up those dog ears right there, and then I'm going to hold that and come down here and see if I have indeed it comes to the point, and it doesn't. So I'm going to lift this ever so slightly to give it a little bit of a nudge there to try and get that, but sometimes, you know, because fabric is on the bias here, it's gonna stretch a little bit, so try not to fool with it too much. But what you're gonna do is just make a memory crease right there. Get it up here on the top. And for this one, you're gonna press it out, and then you're also going to give this one a memory crease. Whew, my glasses are fogging up. This Laura Star is amazing. Links to my Laura Star, I'm an affiliate. Check them out down below. This iron can't be beat for sure. Okay, we're gonna fold this in half. We're gonna line up those dog ears, and then we're going to press that. Bring this one back over, figure out which side is which that you want your piece on. I think we'll do this way. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take this piece here, flip that over on one of the sides. I'm lining up where those memory creases are identically on this piece and on this piece, both pieces. And then I'm going to pin across. Then I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to take this piece and add this piece on. Well, I'll turn it like this so you can see. So I'm taking this crease here, and I'm lining it up right to that crease. And I'm going to pin. And then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance down both sides. Once you have that on there, you're going to press those seams outward. First going to press them outward here on the back, and then I'll go in for that front here in a sec. And then you end up with a block that looks like this. It has tails all over it. So this block is a little bit tricky to square up, but I'm going to show you how I did it. Don't come at me. It's probably not the right way, and I'm sure there is a right way, but this is just how I did it. Okay, you should have a stack of blocks that look like this, and you have a bunch of tails, and everything's been pressed going outward. Then you're going to turn it so it is right side up. And now I told you this is not traditional way because I didn't know how to do it. But I turned it so that I went point to point where that long strip was. And I met those 2 long strips up in the corner. And I did just like in the last step, I put those dog ears together. And I tried to get them so that they were spot on. And then I would check the sides, you know, in this case where the pink is on the left and then the blue one, to make sure that those dog ears lined up. And if things were off just a little bit, because they shouldn't be off a whole lot, because you really haven't trimmed anything yet, you would just shimmy to meet somewhere in the middle, so to speak, so that if one was off a little bit, then the other one was off just a little bit. Because all of that will be hidden in our seam allowance in the end when we go to put them all together, so it's not really too big of a deal. But you want to make sure that you have some type of ruler once you get them all lined up, just like you see how I'm doing, how I folded it. You want to make sure that you have the right kind of ruler. Now the ruler needs to have a line from the corner of the ruler down the center, like slicing things corner to corner. And you can see here that this ruler has that. And then you're just going to make sure that that line lines up in the center of that strip. Now you're measuring and gauging that between the seams, the stitch lines, and then you're going to push up that corner of the ruler until you meet the sides up top, and you'll see it should come out in a V shape there at the top. And you're going to, you know, check the sides again, make sure everything is straight and you don't have any fabric sticking out on those corners. And then what we're going to do is take our rotary cutter and we're going to slice down one side of that strip and down the other side of that strip. And then we're going to go on those sides and just cut those side pieces. You're not going to cut big, long along the side. You're just cutting those pieces. And then when you open it back up, you should be pretty straight. And if you're off a little bit, like I said, it will all be hidden in the seam allowance in the end. And this is a 15-inch block still. So it ended up working out. So I don't know. If there's a different, easier way, just let me know in the comments, because I honestly tried a few different things and I thought, wow, there's no way to really square up this block with all these strips and lines in it. But you know what? It is what it is, and it ended up working out in my quilt, so hopefully it works out in yours. So once you get all of your 16 blocks all trimmed up and ready to go, put them up on your design wall and see if you may want a different outcome than what I ended up getting. I at first thought that I wanted this square type pattern. I had written it out like that, but for this pattern, in order to get those squares to get right on the side and for your points to match up, you had to have added more seam allowance in one direction or the other. I don't know. Because once I ended up sewing it, because that's the way I really wanted it, I ended up seeing, ooh, my points get all cut off. So that's not going to work. So I unpicked that and I came up with the initial design that I wanted, which was the design I ended up with. I just thought the square looked really neat, you know, being one big square and a square all over. But, you know, since the points got cut off, that was a no-go. So I ended up with the squares all over, and I'm happy with it. I think it turned out really cute. But I think that I need some borders. I ended up choosing this black and white stripe that I had in my stash, but let me show you a couple tips on how to deal with striped fabric, because you know what? Striped fabric is a little tricky, but I got some tips for you. Remember when we cut that panel up, how I told you around the selvage areas on the ends that sometimes that the lined fabric makes like skewed, it veers off in one direction or another. Well, it's sort of like that in all fabrics, but you can really tell when you have a stripe like this. So one of the main tips I can give you is that the lines on your ruler need to be parallel with those lines within the stripe area, and you'll be able to tell if it's not. And how you compensate that is cutting all the way down on the one side, leaving yourself some extra room on the other side. So here I need 3.5-inch strips. So I'm cutting a little over 3.5, leaving some on the other side of the strip that I can, you know, trim up, because I can already tell that things are a little skewed. So here I'm just rechecking the lines again and making sure that all the way up the strip, everything is really good. The next thing I'm going to do after I get the one side cut is then flip the entire strip around so that I am now measuring things up to slice off any unevenness on the opposite side of the strip. And now everything should be parallel along those lines on your ruler, aligning up with those strips because you initially cut them right the first time and then flipped it around and you're just cutting any excess off now. Be sure to also cut off the selvages on the ends of the strips so that they are nice and square too, so that when we go to attach them to another strip, because I don't have a long enough piece to fit the whole side of this quilt, so I'm going to have to marry two pieces together, you want to make sure that everything is nice and straight on the end of those strips. Now this is a great tip for you if you are always trying to figure out how to add fabrics together, marry them together when you have like a pattern. So for this pattern, it's a stripe, of course, and what you want to do is lay them right sides together, and in this case you can see the black fabric coming through, so you can tell what's white and what's black, and you want to off-center them, like laying the white stripe on top of the black stripe and so on. And then you're going to pop a pin in there and then follow along one of those black lines that you see on the fabric there, or you know, if whatever your fabric is, a darker fabric, and sew right on that line. And then when you sew that and you lay them the right way like I just did and you open it back up, it's like pure magic. I mean, look at that. You can't even tell where I begin and end, right? Oh my word, game changer. So once you have your border strips cut, then it's time to attach them on. Now let's see here. Oh, geez. For a card quilt, though, it's pretty good size, I think. So I'm going to leave a little bit overhang here, just so I can square that up nicely before I add the other sides on. And I'm just going to pop some pins all the way down. Okay, and you're just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you know, just the norm. I'm going to go ahead and press this border, and then I'm going to trim the sides up, and then I'm just going to continue and add a border all the way around. There's really no top or bottom to this quilt. It's like whichever side you grab is going to be the top sort of thing. I mean, it is a card quilt, so yeah. All of my borders are on, and they are looking so good. I just love this border that I chose. Now this car quilt is a little bigger than the last car quilt I made, so maybe I shouldn't have put the borders on. I don't know. Or maybe I should have made the block smaller. I don't know. Oh well, it is what it is, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get this sandwich together, and we're going to quilt it, and then we're going to see the finished product and all that here soon. So if you're new around here, I have to tell you, to catch you up to speed, that double gauze is one of the absolute best, most comfiest, nuggiest backings to put on any quilt, hands down. Just ask the quilters who've used the double gauze. It's a game changer when it comes to comfort. I typically buy it on sale, and it only comes like 42 inches wide. So of course, you know, I have to marry them together, two pieces. So that's the tip I'm going to share with you here. And if you have a pattern like this one has all these plus patterns on it, and you want to keep them even all across the board, you would fold it on one side and then lay it down on that edge and line it up. And then you would go ahead and crease that really strong right there. And you can see there that crease. And then you're going to lay it back down onto the other piece and flip it over. And then you're going to pin that seam allowance. You definitely don't want to cut that seam allowance just yet. You want to make sure that after you've sewn it, that it is sewn correctly, because you know, you may be doing some unpicking, who knows, right? So make sure you pin all of that excess. You can see there where that crease mark was. And that is the line that you're actually going to sew on all the way down, marrying those two pieces together. And you can see here how much excess I have to the right, but that's just where my pluses lined up properly, you know, as I pulled them in. So, and look here, it looks great, right? It's spot on. There's no doubt about it. Now, what I did next was now trim off that seam allowance. I trimmed it up to 1/2 inch. And then I went ahead and sewed a top stitch all the way down. That just ensures that everything is going to stay nice and tight in there and nothing is going to pull. And if it does, it's not going anywhere. The next tip I have for you is always, always, always press double gauze before you connect it to your quilt. Now, since double gauze is a little bit more shifty because the weave is more open than the traditional cotton piece, I am going to reverse sandwich this. And I do this with linen as well because it's also a shifty fabric. All I did here was just lay my quilt top face down, you know, pretty side down onto the floor. And then I just laid my batting over that. And then I laid the gauze down. I did make sure, however, that that backing and the batting were stuck pretty good together. I just wanted to make sure that everything, you know, laid nice. And then I pulled back the gauze and I got out that glue stick, the big fatty one. And then I just put a bunch of marks on there. I had heard somewhere that people do this, and I thought, you know what? I got so much from you guys in the comments on my last tutorial where I used that spray adhesive. You guys were all yelling at me, and you know what? I thought, well, let me try that glue stick. And so I just, you know, put a bunch of swipes of the glue down, and then I took that gauze and then I just smoothed it over with my hand, you know, best that I could. And I just, you know, kept doing that. I can tell you this, that it was a lot easier to do the glue stick than it is the spray. I don't know why, but it just was. I was kind of a little shocked, to be honest with you. Now this quilt, it was small enough to where I just picked it up all together, sandwiched, and flipped it over. So now the gauze was now on my floor, and of course it was already connected to the batting, so we're all good there. But it was the quilt top now that needed to be attached. I did make sure that the quilt top, you know, fit over top of the batting, and then I rolled it up. And then as you can see right there, I did the first little part of the top of the quilt, or whatever, the side of the quilt. And now I am rolling it back onto the glue that I just, put on there. And yes, I'm in my jams again. Don't judge me. How many of you quilt in your jams? I know I do all the time. Now, mind you, the whole time that I'm doing this stick glue, thing that I've never ever done before to sandwich a quilt together, I'm thinking in my mind, is this really going to work? Am I going to be able to free motion quilt this quilt sandwich? I mean, I was really going through my mind, honestly. And yeah, more on that when we get to the free motion quilting. I know you're just in suspense, right? I must tell you though, using this glue stick and not my spray can that has my adhesive in it, it just felt cleaner. And, of course, duh, it would, right? Because there was no spray going everywhere and, I wasn't breathing any of that in, although they say it's not toxic. And although I didn't have to open my window either, so it just seemed like a whole cleaner type activity. So it's all done and it's all sandwiched up. Now I ended up using 1 3/4 worth of those huge, big, fatty, Elmer's school glue sticks, the purple ones, and that's it. This is a huge tip for you. What I've been doing the last few times is taking my sides and my corners of my quilt sandwich, rolling them up and pinning them upward toward the quilt top, because I have been known to sew over those flaps that are just hanging, and this way it keeps everything nice and tidy and out of the way. This is the absolute perfect type of quilt to do all your practice free motion quilting on. I had so much fun. I did all of the designs that I know how to do and then some on this quilt. I first filled in all those little squares with like feathers all the way around. I did do that in every single little square that was on here. And that's what I'm working on right here. And I'm showing you the back up there in the top right hand corner. And yeah, it was so much fun to do that. And I added, different things, and you'll see through. I mean, I'm not going to show you everything for sake of time, but you can get the gist of it anyways. But here is where I want to talk about that glue stick as you watch the free motion quilting that I'm doing. That glue stick, I can tell you 100% did not gunk up my needle with glue. It just did not. I was surprised. I thought, well, surely it's going to grab something, right? No, it didn't. And my needle is fine. There's nothing on it. I mean, it went through just as if I had sandwiched it with, spray adhesive or some other type of thing. And as far as the shiftiness, did it stick and all that, it for sure stuck. I mean, even with spray basting, sometimes it might come up and off and separate. But with this glue basting, it did not. Wherever I put that glue, it stayed 1000%. And I was totally shocked with that. Now, not to mention that glue sticks are only a couple dollars, and 1 can of my 505 spray adhesive is like $15. And I may get a couple quilts out of that, if that, depending on how big the quilt is. So economically, I mean, the glue stick is, it's a no-brainer. So absolutely, 100%, I will be using glue sticks from here on out. There's no overspray. Things don't get sticky around you, if you get overspray. I mean, the only thing that I came across was my fingers got a little gummy from accidentally, spreading my hand over top of the glue a little bit. But that was it. I mean, it was no big deal. So, yeah, I'm going to tell you guys, get out those fatty glue sticks and start glue basting your quilt together, because you know what? It totally washes out in the washing machine and you'll never see that glue again. It's gone. It washes out totally. So that was a shocker for this quilt. I mean, honestly, I'm still a little shocked, but I'll definitely be using the glue stick again. I mean, how many of you knew about a glue stick to baste your quilt? I know I never really did. I always thought, oh, no, I'm not doing that. But yeah, I'm doing that. So yeah, it's a go on the glue stick. Okay, now back to this quilt. So you can see here I am stitching right next to the ditch on all of those straight lines, and look at how nice it looks on the back. That really did outline it perfectly. Here's a shot of the front. I just love how vibrant those jewel tones look on all of that low volume. Love it. Now this quilt, it was surprisingly easy to square up, and I think it's because I made sure to keep all of my blocks at 15 inches when I cut those little corners off and those little tails and such. So in the end, it was really pretty easy, and so yeah, so there's my squared up quilt. I decided to bind the quilt with the exact same fabric that I used for the backing, which is the double gauze. And I did have to fussy cut those plus signs in order to get that binding just right so that those plus signs were showing on the outside of the quilt. And to my surprise, it ended up working out perfectly. Check out how those plus signs are just cascading right along the side of that quilt, like it was meant to be, right? Now when I come up to a corner, I come about 1/4 inch away from the edge, and then I lift my presser foot and I turn my entire quilt so that the tip, the V shape, is pointing right toward me. And then I put my presser foot back down and I sew 45 right off the corner there. And you can see right there what that looks like. It slants right out. Now with your quilt totally out from underneath your needle, you're going to pull that binding back to the right there, and the raw edge of the quilt top and the binding are all parallel. Now you're going to pinch that corner area and then lift that binding back up over it's onto itself, and then pinch that so that now you have a folded edge right there at the very edge of your quilt top. You're going to pinch that together. Sometimes I'll put a clip there too. But here I just pinched it and then I shifted my quilt so that now I'm just going to continue over. I'm going to always backstitch right there too at the corner. I didn't show that, but I do that. And then I just continue on sewing all around the rest of the quilt. It's important to note that in order to do this method, you do need to have a tail on both sides of where you stopped and started your sewing on the binding. So what you're going to do here is keep it folded, and just like you see me do here, match up those folded edges of both sides of that binding together, leaving about 1/8 to 1/4 inch gap in between there. You're just folding that binding back onto itself there. And then you're going to put a memory crease right there. Make sure that you can see it, that memory crease, so press it good. And then you're going to open those strips of binding back up, and you're going to take a heat erasable pen and you're going to mark that plus sign there, right in the center of that plus sign. It's like a crisscross X or whatever. You're just going to dot both the top and the bottom so that you can see what's going on with that middle section there. Next, you're going to take that excess of where that border is there. You can see me pinching that. Pinch it up a couple times. Take a big clip and just pop it right on there. That's going to grab all that excess so we can actually put and pin these together. You're going to take and lay that left side out just like you see me with the right side up. Then you're going to grab the other piece and then put that right side down. So now they're right sides together. You want those dots to connect together. And here I just pop a pin in right through the dots and into my mat, and then I straighten up those strips so that it makes a nice plus sign. And I'm just checking to make sure that when I open it and sew it that it's gonna be right. Yeah, and it looks good. Next, you're going to take your ruler and you're gonna make a line corner to corner, pin both sides of where that line is, and then you're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're gonna sew right on that line. Here's what that looks like at the sewing machine. I'm just, being real careful because it still is a shifty fabric, remember, even when the pins are in. And I just sewed right on the line, and here I'm just opening it up. Now this is your chance right here where you can unpick if it's too gappy or if it's too tight. Mine's just right, so I went ahead and clipped off the seam allowances. Next, you're going to press those seam allowances open and be sure to fold that back down and repress it. Now you're all set to just attach the rest of the binding down. It's so magical, friends. It really is. It's important to note that I did take my time because I had to ease that binding in. But guess what, friends? Yep, you can't win them all. Check out that plus sign that I hacked right off. I didn't even realize it. Oh well. Introducing my car quilt. But it doesn't have a name. You all got to give me a name for this quilt. What do you think I should name this quilt? Make sure that you leave it down in the comments. I absolutely love low volume fabric. I just do. I love how it just plays with light and you really can't tell what it is from afar until you get right up on it. And these jewel tones, they fit the bill for this quilt, no doubt. I do love this border. My border ended up a little bit wavy. You can see how that's coming out there. And I'm not sure if it's because of the gauze or it's the way I trimmed the quilt. I'm not sure. But it'll all come out in the wash, I'm almost positive. I never ever have a wavy quilt. But also, I just now realized I have never made a quilt where I've actually bound it with an actual cut double gauze binding. So that could be it too. But I do think it's all going to come out in the wash because it is perfectly square. So I don't know. I wanted to be sure and pop this picture in after washing and drying this quilt. It did end up having two slight, waves in it, which is really weird to me because typically I don't ever see this in my quilt. So I'm wondering if it has to do with the gauze binding or I'm just not sure. Tell me in the comments what you think it could be. Let's see if I can get a picture of the back here for you. The back, you can really tell the quilting. Ooh, 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 ooh. You know what? Let me just take the whole thing off and show you. So while I'm taking this down, I wanted to remind you all that, hopefully I'm not going to poke myself. I wanted to remind you all about the quilt retreat. If you would like to meet me or April from April's Craft Room or Di from Sister Chicks Quilting, we are hosting a quilt retreat in Missouri in April. So I will leave the link down below, or you can just type in 3quiltamigas.com and you can get all of the information on how you can come to a quilt retreat and quilt with 3 of your favorite YouTubers. It doesn't get any better than that, right? Everyone that purchases a retreat ticket will get their name into a drawing to win the special edition Platinum TL QVP sewing machine graciously donated by Juki Junkies. So you don't want to miss out. Someone's going to walk away with that sewing machine. Okay, back to this. Let's look at the back. You can really see that quilting, how it pops on the back, and I love that because as I'm using this quilt or when anyone uses it, I'm sure that they'll look at the back, right? These little plus signs on the side, I'm so glad that I put them toward the front and not the back. I do love how that just frames this entire quilt. Take a look at your screen right now. I have hand selected some videos that I know that you are sure to enjoy. Go ahead, click on one of them so we can keep learning together. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.